international sounds in new soul, R&B, hip-hop, and a little taste of everything in between. Every show features independent producers from across the globe in the beats beneath, and the 10 sweetest vibes of the week smooth out the night in the 10 drop. Honey Drop, each and every Sunday from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time, here on ILive Radio, serving up audible treats like honey, always with a heavy beat drop.
Attention à tous les musiciens, groupes, associations, clubs et organisations qui représentent les styles collectifs de musique à travers le Canada. Le moment est venu de reconstruire nos genres de nations musicales collectives comme le hip-hop, le R&B, le jazz, le soul, le reggae, le gospel et plus unis. La Nation de la musique collective est une organisation à but non lucratif engagée dans le développement de la musique collective. Des adhésions gratuites sont disponibles dès maintenant. La Nation de la musique collective, une seule voix, la force dans l'unité.
Your number one local radio station.
Welcome to the show, everyone. Thank you for joining me this evening. Once again, I've got Anessa Humbert, who's hanging out with me. Tonight, we're going to be talking a little bit about relationships and a whole bunch of interesting things. Hi, Anessa.
Hey, Patrick. You know, after all these years, you still say my name the Jamaican way?
Oh, it looks like I lost your audio again.
You lost my audio?
Let's try and get this connected here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Perfect. We got you.
Okay.
Okay, good.
I was telling you that after all these years, you still say my name the Jamaican way.
I'm Jamaican. What? We've already had this disclaimer about me being a serial name killer, so.
Okay.
Plus, I'm Jamaican on top of it, so, you know. It's just
you're in the wrong profession, man.
I know. There's only I can only get so far on my good looks, you know. That's what it is. I'm trying to benefit off of that.
I don't understand that world, but I believe you.
Mind you, I've been getting a whole lot of hate because of my COVID beard. I'm thinking about shaving it off because people have been, it's weird. I get a lot of people who are like, dude, you need to, like, what the hell? Get rid of that. And then other people are like, we really like the beard. So,
I like the beard. I just want to cornrow it so badly from here to here.
You know the amount of offers I've gotten? Okay, this show's not about my beard.
Okay, let's do this.
Let's do this. So we're talking about implicit bias and how that kind of impacts relationships. And okay, so you know you've got the PhD, so maybe you can give us a Coles Notes version of what implicit bias is.
So first of all, I feel like I need a major disclaimer, which is I do not study implicit bias. I study swallowing, as you guys know from the previous session. However, I've heard you talk extensively about relationships because that's what you do. You do workshops, you talk about relationships. Yep. And it just so happens that I've done a couple of things. I've published a paper about men in the field of pathology. Our field is like more like 95% white female in the United States, or 90% white female. So predominantly female, yet men still tend to make more money and have more leadership positions. So I had to actually do some research with implicit bias. And I recently was asked to give a talk on implicit bias in business. So here's what happened. I'm doing all this deep dive into implicit bias just to make sure that I'm explaining it properly in these talks and papers. And a lot of the things that you were saying about relationships keep coming to mind. And I'm thinking, I wonder if there's a connection between some of the problems that you mentioned related to relationships and perhaps implicit bias. So let me explain. First of all, implicit bias is essentially something all humans do. No human can get away from it. It's not always good and it's not always bad. It just depends. But the idea is that implicit bias is automatic categorization of things, people, events, et cetera, that basically lead you to a quick assumption. And it's usually from socialized things that are pretty well ingrained into you. Like the idea of a woman president is probably still shocking because, well, you just haven't seen that many of them in the United States, right? A great way that they test this is if you Google Harvard and implicit bias test, you'll see a gazillion types of implicit bias tests. A good example of one is where you have to associate Black faces with either positive names or negative names, or negative connotations.
Mhm.
And people, both black and white, tend to be faster when associating black faces with negative names than positive names. It runs pretty deeply, even among people like myself who think that's bullshit, right? But still, when you're ingrained in something, the first thing that comes to your head is what you type. You can't wait and think. You have to move very fast with your responses, and you'll find implicitly you have those connections ingrained in you, and you have to sort of really think really hard about getting them out of your brain. Okay, so now here's how it comes to relationships. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you were saying that there are all these concerns related to what women think about men and what men think about women and dating, etc. And there was something that you were saying about men and the woman that's a booty call versus the woman that is marriage material. And I thought the following.
So let me just clarify here before I start to get a whole lot of hate mail. All right. So there's been an ongoing conversation with various women, wherein they're trying to understand why it is that if a guy's having a booty call with them, then why are they not the woman that he would end up marrying? He would end the booty call, and then marry someone else. And so they're trying to figure out, like, well, why not me? Why wasn't I the one who was chosen to be married? But I was, throwing it down in the bedroom. I was doing this, I was doing that. I was bogling in my head, you name it. And he still chose somebody else. And so that's been an ongoing conversation with a group of women in various different forms.
In the United States, that's not a new concept. Like there is a conversation that's being had. I'm not saying that there are data that substantiate this, but there's a conversation being had that men have been ingrained to think that there's a woman who you take home to mom, quote unquote, and then there's women you have fun with, right? And so you hear things like marriage material. She's marriage material, right? But
Yeah.
My question is the following. If you see a beautiful woman walking down the street who's dressed in a particular way that might suggest that she really appreciates her body and she thinks herself sexually, whatever you think that comes to your head.
Yep.
And she ends up being somebody who's sexually free and secure, and you guys have amazing sex, right? I would argue that those might not be the women that they would take home to mom, because they've been ingrained to think that that they're not supposed to be the same. I will take it a step further and say, whereas black men might hear something like, this police officer charged that black man, or approached that black man, racially profiled him because he had on a hoodie, saggy pants, and Timbs. Everybody would be like, what do you mean he looked suspicious? He looked the part. Everybody would say that's garbage. However, if a confident woman walks in with clothing that is relatively seductive in whatever world that means to you, and a lot of guys are bothering her, and she goes, oh, this is so annoying. People go, well, you shouldn't have dressed that way. So why isn't the dress for a sexual issue different from a racial one? Is it sexual profiling? I don't know. But I feel like if a woman dresses in a way where she looks like she appreciates her body, wants to be appreciated for her body, it doesn't mean that she's had sex with 500 men. It just means she's wearing those clothes. Just like if a black man is dressed in a stereotypical thug way that we've seen on TV that's been ingrained in our head, it doesn't mean he's a criminal or is in any way dangerous or violent.
So a big part of society, though, might be the thought might be, well, if she's dressing that way to get that attention. And that might, again, goes back to the bias, right? So in the guys who are looking at her might be thinking, okay, she wants this attention. But then when they approach her and she doesn't want the attention, then it might seem confusing, because then it's like, well, if you don't want the attention, if you don't want a guy looking at your chest, then if you're walking around with your cleavage all huge out, then why, if you don't want somebody to look? So it's like, right, you're putting something on display, and then when somebody looks, then you're complaining. But then if it's the type of guy that they'd be interested in, then there isn't a problem with that.
Right. And I would say the same thing is the case among those very men if you said, and the way you're dressed right now, if a police officer said, sir, we have reason to believe that you stole or you took that woman's purse because you're dressed in Timberlands and you have on a hoodie or a do-rag, and you must have, I mean, you're clearly looking for attention. And people said, well, of course you were arrested. Look what you were wearing. A lot of those guys would be like, I should be able to wear whatever I want without assumptions about the things that I've done. And by the way, actually stealing is worse than actually having sex with men you enjoy having sex with. So what if she's had a lot of sex and?
But I see, again, conversations with women. A lot of women nowadays are complaining that men are not really approaching them anymore. And so there's a conversation on the men's side that they're having, that they're kind of like, you know what, given the climate, I don't want to be I don't want to approach a woman and her look at me and deem that as inappropriate. So you know what, I'm not going to. Or you know, from an academic standpoint, I've read articles wherein for some professors who are male, they're opting out of mentoring females because their concern is that if they do end up mentoring a female and she says something that is not true, then their careers could be, you know, messed up. So there's lots of, I don't know, stuff in and around it that makes it a little not that clear, black and white, kind of messy.
Right, because humans are idiots half the time, to be honest. Like, and we've all been there in some way, shape, or form. We really didn't think through a situation. And you know what? Men are missing out as well. Yeah. So you can blame the fact that there are these media cases that have been thrown in our face. You know, this is essentially what we call availability heuristic. So let me just explain really quickly. We all have cognitive biases. Cognitive biases are shortcuts humans make to come to a conclusion quickly that lead us down the wrong path. That's essentially what it is. We do it all the time. You guys may have heard of confirmation bias, which is if you believe something, any evidence somebody brings you confirms the bias you already had, right? And people don't look for disconfirmatory evidence. So those men can say, there's a case of a Me Too moment happening on TV. So that gorgeous woman I won't talk to. Well, then you're missing out, because what you've done is taken one big issue over there and applied it to everything. That's essentially what that is. And that's an example of why I wanted to talk to you about it, because the assumptions that people make in the world around things like race, et cetera, that are really big, and women in pay, are applying to relationships, because people aren't actually thinking. They're using whatever bias comes to their head and say, well, I want to approach a woman. Well, enjoy your life. Doesn't sound fun. And the other thing is, women know when they want to take the cues. Sometimes they don't take the cues. It's like, hey, you married? Yes. Happily? For crying out loud. Did you have to follow up with the extra? Am I wrong? You're saying she's not wrong.
No, you're not wrong. You're right. And you know what? That's when I was married, I had that question quite a lot being posed to me. You know, so here we are, or as you say, messy human beings, and we're trying to figure out what the rules are. Mm-hmm. And I think there was a point in time in our history wherein I think we thought we knew what the rules were, and we're now in an environment that the rules that we thought we knew what they were are explicitly being rewritten on the fly. And so trying to figure out what that new normal, new balance, whatever you want to call it is very messy. Yeah. That, you know, implicit bias, and we're talking about, you know, if you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but you know, it's kind of like that subconscious knee-jerk reaction that we have sometimes. Yeah. And
there's no thinking involved in implicit bias. It comes to your head before you get a chance to really process. Yeah.
And so right. when we going back to what we started off with the whole, you know, why not me? in some scenarios, again, with conversations I've had with guys, wherein in and around this question, the thought is always this is what our agreement was in the beginning, that it's a booty call, but then somewhere along the line, feelings change, or females have said the same thing. This is what the agreement was, it's just the booty call, but then he catch feelings, and now he wants more, but I don't want more. And the guy might be saying to her, I don't want more. I just want what we had. Let's leave it there. And then that person might be fulfilling a sexual need, but not a whole lot else. Or they may be going into it not looking for anything else other than that sexual gratification.
Sure.
And then feelings get involved, and that becomes confusing a little bit because, as you said, humans were messy, right?
Yeah. And frankly, of all the relationships that humans can have, love relationships are the most fickle. Yet, it's the only relationship where there's a legal obligation to keep that feeling forever. It's called marriage. So you don't sign on the dotted line to be someone's best friend. Hey, I met you last week. We had a good conversation. Can you sign here to be my best friend forever, please? This doesn't happen. So that's why
I can't send you a contract for you to be my best friend.
Exactly. Or if you meet somebody and you have great time with them, you always end up at the bar on Fridays or something. And then somebody goes, hey, where's this going? Nobody does that in friendships. They don't go, are we going to be besties? Or like, what, dude? Like, where's this going? It's the only relationship where people say, where's this going, right? Because there's a thing at the end that we've been trained is supposed to terminate or finalize or be the cherry on top of relationships, which is marriage or some kind of a situation where you say, you claim me in front of people. And I think that that's the bigger issue that everybody's sort of dealing with, which is marriage the terminal thing for everybody? Or what is more? When you said they want more, they usually want more, but then if you're asking for more, aren't you asking the other person for less?
If the other person doesn't want more.
Yeah, that's my point. So you're in a relationship and you say, I like what we have, I want more. Meaning I want to be exclusive in a lot of circumstances. I want it to just be us. But you're not just saying you want more, you're saying you want all of it. You don't want that person to have anything more. You want them to have less. That might be the question to say, I like what we have, but I want you to have less outside booty.
But I'm enough. You shouldn't want more.
Well, that's a personal opinion.
Isn't that the
right? Because
but that's the thing, right? Is that we've been conditioned that relationships should be leading, somewhere, whether that's the house with the white picket fence and the 2.3 or one child or whatever that is. There's this notion that that's what it's supposed to be. I think there's definitely a redefining of that's going on right now, and wherein it's very fluid. The way that people identify is very fluid nowadays, and relationships are becoming very fluid from that perspective. And it can seem messy because if you were brought up believing one particular thing and now you're trying to operate in a world that's a lot more fluid than what it used to be, there can be a lot of struggle in and around that.
Right. And that's the whole point, which is the things that you've been ingrained to think sometimes dominate your behavior and you don't even know why you believe that thing, right? Mm-hmm. So if you have this person and what your issue is with, you guys hang out all the time, I guess, my younger friends, my little sisters of the world would call this a situationship, which is where you have everything except for the label, right? Yeah. You're with this person, they're your companion, they're your person, you tell them everything, you guys have sex, etc., right? You even know their parents, blah, blah, blah. So if you're in that kind of a situation, the more really is, I just don't want you to have anyone outside because I'm jealous, or I want it to just be us, or whatever it is. I'm not saying there's any problem with that. I think that's a reasonable, fair, naturally human response. I just think that we don't always think about what we're asking the other person to do, which is, I actually want you to have less. So you have to deny all outside interests because, as you said, I'm enough. Well, maybe you're not, and that's hard for a human being to come to terms with. And that's the conversation to be had, which is, what do you get from outside things? Talk to me about that. Is it the chase? Is it the new? Because what did Chris Rock say? The only thing better than pussy is good is new pussy. I mean, isn't that an actual thing that people that could be real? I don't know. You tell me.
That's definitely something that varies from people to people, right? Again, at the end, it's where's this going, right? What is the expectation? What is the what is the expectation that the party involved have, and how clear they are in providing that information or sharing that information, right? Because okay, so we're going to take a quick break in like less than a minute or so. But yeah, it goes back to, you know, what is the expectation, and where do those expectations come from? Do we is it something that's ingrained in us? Is it something that we've learned that's been beaten into us as a child? You know, is it media? Is it society? You name it. Being able to figure out what that is and where exactly that's coming from. Most of us don't spend the time to define that for ourselves. We allow for religion or our parents or you name it. We allow for so many different things in order to define it for us. But when we come back, we're going to continue on this topic of exclusivity. So we're going to take a quick commercial break. And when we get back, myself and Nessa, we're going to continue the conversation in and around relationships and exclusivity and all this wonderful things.
This is Jamie Sparks, and you're listening to ILive Radio, changing the way you listen to radio.
Hey, this is Jermaine Robbins, and you're listening to ILive Radio, changing the way you listen to radio.
Yo, this is Kiana O'Quinn, and you're listening to ILive Radio, changing the way you listen to radio.
This is Lavinia J from the UK, and you're listening to ILive Radio.
Attention, all musicians, bands, associations, clubs, and organizations that represent collective styles of music across Canada. Now is the time to rebuild our collective music nation. Genres like hip-hop, R&B, jazz, soul, reggae, gospel, and more united. The Collective Music Nation is a non-profit organization committed to the development of collective music. Free memberships are available now. Collective Music Nation, one voice, strength in unity.
This is Miss Care keeping you connected with your ILive 5x5, brought to you by ILive Music, sponsored by Independent Hype, and powered by The Hook Entertainment. Contribute to the conversation by using hashtag ILive 5x5.
For the latest and greatest in soul music and more, stay tuned to ILive Radio throughout the week.
Connect with our team at iliveradio.com or follow us at ILive Radio across social platforms.
The number one hit music station.
You're listening to ILive Radio, changing the way you listen to radio. ILive Radio.
And we're back. I'm Patrick O'Morris, and with me is Anessa. And once again, we're talking about relationships and implicit bias. Okay, so we continue on this topic about exclusivity. And
can I say something really quickly about? I wanted it, but I know we had to go commercial break. You kept saying the word expectations, right?
Yeah.
And I already said that love relationships are like the most fickle thing out there. It's why there's so many movies and songs about love. Like, if you can't be with one, love the one you're with, or love is a losing game. All these kinds of songs about why don't you love me, right? Given how fickle it is, expectations should be made clear. But because there's so much at stake, people don't actually communicate their expectations as well as they think they communicate them. Mm-hmm. But there's a quote I heard at the beginning of this year, which I thought was so key. And it said, the quote is, unspoken expectations are premeditated resentments.
It's true.
Meaning, if you never say what you expect, and it doesn't mean you can't change. Like you said, in the beginning, there's everything's fine. We're just playing around or whatever. And then somebody's feelings change. Mm-hmm. And when they say those expectations, they could still be hurt because the person doesn't validate them and say, yes, me too. I've been feeling that way. Let's be together. Mm-hmm. Or it could very well be that they just keep asking questions like, so where is this going? Blah, 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 blah. And you can get the sense that they want something more, but then they start to resent the person because they're, quote, stringing them along, right?
Yeah.
But it may not necessarily be the case unless, of course, you've clearly said, look, this is what I want. These are my terms. These are my parameters. And then here's what I'm going to have to do if not. And if they go, okay, see ya, then those weren't unspoken expectations. And perhaps you can move on to somebody who can appreciate you the way that you feel you deserve to be appreciated.
But I think that's where a lot of the fear comes in is it's almost like it's better to bury your head in the sand and keep going, hoping that you're going to get the result that you want without
actually. It's like hanging on to that shitty job until a better one comes along, but you don't want to be broke. You're like, it's a warm body, so I'll take it.
It'll keep me busy for right now. But but those, okay, so those expectations are the things that I don't think as human beings we spend enough time to figure out. We just sort of, for the most part, just kind of accept that this is what we've been told that it's supposed to look like or be like. And anything that falls outside of that box can be terrifying, number one.
Yeah.
And terrifying on multiple levels, because one, you really got to spend some time with yourself to figure yourself out, to know what you like from what you don't like, and yada yada, all that wonderful stuff. And most people they don't like being alone. They don't like to look at themselves, look into themselves, or figure themselves out, but they were expecting for someone else to be able to do that. And so they walk into the relationship with that expectation that this person, the Hollywood line, you complete me, right?
Batman, hello.
But they've never really spent the time to figure out, that they're already complete and what that means for them. So now walking into a relationship with those biases, that knee-jerk reaction, that expectation, that whatever you want to call it, of this is what it's supposed to be like. He or she is supposed to sweep me off my feet, or she's supposed to be an amazing cook, throw down in the kitchen and throw down in the bedroom, and then I'm going to work and make all the money. There's so many different things that go along with that, but what works?
Wait, can I ask you this question? Because now you remind me of something else, which is, let's go back to the original notion that men have this assumption that there's somebody you take home versus somebody you have a booty call with. And the idea is that, you have this amazing sexual adventure with this person, but let's marry somebody who's had one partner because I want to have dry sex. Like, can you help me as a woman? Because this doesn't live in my world. There's no marry a pure guy being, where would he be?
Well, you wouldn't want to marry. I'm sure there's a few.
No, I'm saying there's no societal norm that has been driven into me as a female saying, make sure you marry a man who's pure sexually. That's never happened. But the reverse, don't marry a hoe is what you were saying, that we often hear, which I've heard a lot, that men say, so-and-so's not marriage material. Yeah. And on one hand, you could argue that isn't that why I'm now hearing a lot of my male friends say, wow, I think about stepping outside of my marriage because I realized that we don't have adventurous sex because I married the woman who perhaps didn't have a lot of experience or is less willing to be adventurous. It doesn't mean that this is all the case. I clearly said a few of my friends. Don't go out there. All the women like, just because I was a prude, I'm not talking about you.
All of your girlfriends are going to be sending you hate mail saying you're talking.
Exactly. And I said a few of my male friends. But the other thing is, why would you think that you have to give up on an amazing human being, hopefully, who you have great sex with it because, quote, you can't bring her home to mom? Isn't that blaming women on women? Is it really your mom that's keeping you from this, or the fact that you don't want to be a guy who married a, quote, hoe, which, by the way, I don't think actually exists, because if you ask somebody to define a hoe, it changes by generation. So let's talk about that too.
Yeah, being a hoe, yeah, definitely does change. The definition of that does change by from generation to generation. See, the perception is this. That men, we want a woman who's going to be a hoe in the bedroom,
right? But what can't this, quote, hoe do outside the bedroom? She can't cook. What
No,
is she doing on the street? Like, what is it about her that is unacceptable outside the bedroom?
Let me finish. Let me finish. So again, the notion is, like, you know, a guy wants a hoe in the bedroom, so he wants her to be able to throw down in the bedroom. He wants her to be able to, you know, cook up a decent meal or whatnot.
Why?
And also to be able to connect with him on a mental level.
But what's the food for? Help me understand. What's the mind, stomach, genitalia connection that I'm missing?
Because we like to eat. You know?
So do we. So are you saying that there's not amazing takeout in your neighborhood? Like,
I'm not suggesting that the guy should, you know, if takeout works for you, it works for you. I've got a friend of mine who he has no idea where the kitchen in his house is.
Actually cook. And I get that I have friends, and male and female, who are horrifying in the kitchen. They don't even know why they want so badly to cook. I don't think that everybody can cook. It's just a thing. Just like some people don't know how to have sex properly.
This is true.
Problem. I don't know what to tell them.
Okay, back to your original question before you went off this rant here.
Right now.
Yeah, the definition of what a hoe is definitely something that evolves.
Okay.
And then from conversations that I've had with men as to why it is that they wouldn't marry the booty call is it's always seems to be reasonably simple in that the girl might be wicked in the bedroom, but the intellectual stimulation that he craves with a woman, she may not necessarily be able to provide that. And so there are men out there who will trade off there's that intellectual stimulation for okay sex, but they won't necessarily trade off amazing sex for that lack of mental stimulation or that mental connection. And so a lot of times the guys get into a booty call with a girl because she's great in the bedroom, but that's what she's bringing to the table, and not that alone. That alone is not necessarily going to keep the guy connected on all the other levels that he wants to be connected with. And so I think
about that. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Do you have any data supporting this idea that somebody who is good sexually, which is subjective as hell?
Oh yeah.
Wait.
Yeah.
Is subjective.
Yeah.
Somehow doesn't have a brain to put two and two together, or is it possible? Or and the reverse, which is women who are prudes somehow can use their brain better.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue that there is an assumption that anyone who they approach for sex, they're not willing to sit down and have a deep and meaningful with, because they're there for sex.
Yeah.
So these can't possibly be people, male or female. Mm-hmm. But we'll talk about males because you brought that up, and I totally respect the idea that you had these conversations. It's great anecdotal information. I appreciate it. Mm-hmm. But the idea is that these are individuals who are looking for sex. Is it possible that they have basically this confounding variable, which is, I'm only here for sex. And as soon as they have their orgasm, they're out the door. Maybe she had some amazing thoughts to actually share, but they didn't stick around to hear it. So of course, their confirmation bias didn't even give her a chance, because they've already decided you can't have it all, when I don't think that's true. Again, it would also mean that if you sit down with a woman who has an amazing brain, you're like, shit, she's not going to be great in bed. I mean, I just feel like these are these are not mutually inclusive or exclusive. I think that is way more complicated. And any human being who feels that way perhaps is driving home the implicit bias and not taking each individual as a complex human being.
I totally agree with you that there are possibilities of that implicit bias would be at play with that. And I think, again, it goes back to what people are walking into this with, right? So on both sides of the fence. So on one side, the person who is in the booty call, who catches feelings, and wants more, the other person might just have them in that box. You're just a booty call and that's it. I don't want anything male or female. I don't want anything more than that. This is just who you are, and they will forever see them in that light and being able to. Maybe it's equivalent to being stuck in the friend zone, when the person might be the most amazing friend possible, and probably would be the best partner for you because they know you inside and out and all that wonderful stuff. But they're stuck in the friend zone.
Yeah. And you know what? I get that. That was great. I'm so glad you brought that up, because there's nothing I can do if I'm not sexually attracted to somebody. I can't conjure it up just for funsies. And there's no amount of Porsches and Lamborghinis that matter. And in fact, I would argue that most men, I'm putting it out there as a general statement, and I'm sure I'm going to get lambasted for this, but here we go. I've had wine. I would argue that many, see how I fix it? Many men don't know what to do with a woman who doesn't care about whether or not they have money or their money. Like, really, if a woman is self-sufficient financially and she's really looking for companionship and amazing sex, and not impressed at all or deterred at all by their low income or impressed by their high income, it's just like, who are you as a human being? What kind of companion might you be? It's kind of like, but I have a Porsche, but I spent all this money on this thing for you. It's like, yeah, what's your brain telling me? That's rough for them.
Yeah. And I think from the male standpoint, the equivalent of that is how pretty a woman is.
What do you
mean? In that, just like there are a lot of guys who rely on their money to attract a mate, and then they get kind of confused when the person they're talking to, it's like, it's not about the money. There are a lot of really beautiful women out there that rely on their beauty in order to try to keep a guy.
Yes.
Right. And then they end up being very confused when the guys are not sticking around.
And they're sticking around for somebody who, in their subjective opinion, is like, I don't know, whatever they think a 6 is. And that person thinks they're something more than that. And they're like, but my lashes are naturally long.
Exactly. So
I'm sure that's what they're all thinking, lashes.
Exactly what they're all thinking. But again, it goes back to that bias where it's kind of like, well, okay, so what are we, what are we doing in terms of being able to figure out me, to be able to figure out what exactly works for me? What is it that I want? And a lot of it is trial and error, because there's not really a whole lot of examples out there. There's a whole lot of examples as to what is beneficial to the system.
You know what I think would help, Patrick?
What would
help? You and I have had so many of these conversations, and I would argue that you and I trust each other, that if we have a conversation about this, it's simply an opinion, but that person can be free to express themselves. It's not a men are from Mars, women are from Venus, and we're totally different. I hate when people say different species, because that's stupid, but that we're just so different that it's always a male versus female thing. I do think that there is room for men and women to have conversations where it's not about this side versus that side, where it's actually about, let me hear this human being out who's going to challenge my notions. And here's the important thing about all of these biases I talked about. The best way to deal with them and to get perhaps what you want and understand who you are is to, 1, declare your biases, put them out there, and 2, seek out disconfirmatory evidence, which might be from somebody who can ask you or challenge you to explain why you think what you think. So if somebody puts a blanket statement out there and says, I just feel like my friend said a few days ago, if a woman's had sex with more than, 5 guys, then that's too much. Tell me more about that. Tell me what the magic number of 5 is. What does that do? So you're saying an amazing person who's had sex with 7 guys. She's off because 7. What does that say about you and your thinking? Is it have anything to do with your manhood? These kinds of conversations are actually what challenge people. And I think that's the way to get over these biases, is to talk about them, declare them, and look for disconfirmatory evidence.
I don't know. I'm right. I'm always right. So, when we have these conversations,
enjoy your life.
That's what it boils down to. I'm kidding about that, but no, as you know.
Are you?
Every time we do this, you're drinking wine and you make me feel like I don't have a glass. Yeah. So there's a certain belief almost that our opinion has to be the right opinion. Mm-hmm. And so there's a bit of a struggle, a power struggle a lot of times in relationships because both parties are trying to be right. Both parties are trying to be right. And
nobody's trying to listen.
Nobody's trying to listen because everybody's trying to be right. And so it doesn't work, because if I'm busy trying to prove my point and not even listening to what you're saying to be able to understand or empathize with what you're saying, and you're too busy trying to prove your point because you're not even listening to it, then how do we even get to that point wherein we're going to be able to have this discourse without necessarily bumping into each other consistently? Yeah. And but then the other piece of it as well is I have to be confident in who I am as a person in order to be able to listen to you and get that, whatever that feedback is from you. And you have to also be confident in the person you are to be able to get whatever feedback I'm giving, or listen to whatever it is I'm saying. And then if it's a well, we agree to disagree or whatever, in the end, whatever it works out to be, I think it has to start off with a good understanding of who you are. Yeah.
But when you have a disagreement with anybody, sometimes I wonder, and it helps to ask explicitly. So you're going back and forth, could be your mom, could be your loved one, etc. You're going back and forth. And it's almost like both parties should stop and say, okay, we're on a commercial break from our argument. What would it mean to you if I agreed with you? And the reverse, what would it mean to you if I agreed with you? Like if at the end of this conversation, I'm like, oh my God, you're right. What does that do for you? Like, what does that mean for you? And it could be as little as I finally got you to listen, or this matters because blah, blah, blah. That's the significance or relevance of the argument. Sometimes it seems like both people just want to be right, but usually there's something bigger behind that. It's like something like, I don't think you value my opinion. Woo, that's a big one. Let's talk about that. What has happened over there? Many years or months or weeks of our relationship that you've concluded that I don't value your opinion. So those to me are the bigger concepts that are driving these symptoms of a bigger disease in any relationship. We can be arguing over whether there should be butter or oil to fry the eggs, but really isn't that a bigger problem, which is you always think you're right and you don't value what I have to say. That's the argument that needs to be had, right?
It's butter, not oil. Okay.
I'm not getting into this with you because I'm lactose intolerant. So
my condolences.
There's a health related consequence to being right on this one.
Doesn't matter. I'm still right. We're gonna take a commercial break, but this whole notion of wanting to be right, be on the win. I can't tell you the amount of times I've seen the memes, and you've probably seen them too, wherein it's like a guy sending a text to his buddies or something saying, my wife said I'm right. What do I do? Because it never happens, and the response would be like, get out of the house now, run or something. Anyways, we're going to come back in 2 minutes, and we're going to continue the conversation. I want to thank you guys for listening. We'll be right back in a few minutes.
Hi, this is Michonne Young, and you're listening to ILive Radio, supporting independent artists from all around.
This is Ronnie Sia, and you're listening to ILive Radio. ILive Radio, changing the way you listen to radio. Listen to radio. Listen to radio.
It goes down right here on ILive Radio.
Yo, this is Razan here, and you're listening to ILive Radio, changing the way we listen to radio.
What's up, everybody? This is Cy Smith, and you're listening to ILive Radio, changing the way you listen to radio.
My beautiful people, it's your man Tayanis, and right now you got it locked to ILive Radio, changing the way you listen to radio around the world, baby.
Nothing makes you look, feel, and perform better than a tailor-made suit. Just like a tailor-made suit, a mortgage is not a one-size-fits-all solution. Canadian Tailored Mortgage Solutions will customize a mortgage to perfectly suit your needs. Come and get fitted for your mortgage today at 1-877-834-9346 or reach us on the web at ctmortgagesolutions.com. COVID safety protocols are in place. Brokerage license number 13228.
This is Miss Care keeping you connected with your ILive 5x5. Brought to you by ILive Music, sponsored by Independent Hype, and powered by The Hook Entertainment. Contribute to the conversation by using hashtag ILive5x5.
For the latest and greatest in soul music and more, stay tuned to ILive Radio throughout the week.
Connect with our team at iliveradio.com or follow us at ILive Radio across social platforms.
You're listening to ILive Radio.
Here are some words of wisdom. Don't change your station. Don't change your station.
And we're back. And okay, so before the break, we're talking about this whole implicit bias thing, and there's always there's tons and tons of memes out there about the women's always right, and if a guy wins an argument, it's kind of like there's going to be a consequence towards it or something like that. But there's that whole battle of the sexes. One's got to win and the other one's got to lose. It doesn't really work well for any kind of a healthy relationship, because it creates a very combative situation. And but that's how we're kind of cultured in a way, as much as it's equal rights and all this sort of stuff and blah blah blah. It's almost like there's this background noise of implicit bias that we've learned from our parents, from Hollywood, from you name it. That's all around, just that we're being bombarded with. That's hard to filter through that to then figure out, okay, what am I going to be about? What do I like? What do I want? And that goes into the bedroom too, wherein there's a lot of that confusion translate because people are afraid to say what they want, what they like, what they don't like.
There's a whole movie called What Women Want. So
yeah, that's true too. Or I think the original was with Mel Gibson, What Men Want. There's all of this stuff out there, and but it goes back to us as an individual, no?
So, may I ask you the following question based on what you just said?
Sure.
Which I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. But my question is this. What would you say the biggest thing is that men fail to communicate to women who they're in a romantic relationship with? I'm first going to put out there my idea, and you can tell me if I'm way off base because I'm not a guy in a romantic relationship with a woman.
Okay.
I would argue that indicating, clarifying how you really feel about this woman in an intimate way that might make you appear to be vulnerable, or whooped, right? Even though if you're not. You're just like really into this woman and you might be falling for her something. I think those aren't messages that are easily conveyed to women. I think sometimes they're conflated with sexual innuendos, but they're not purely emotional and about who you are as a human being and why I'm so into you. They seem to be somehow connected to physical things. Well, tell me if I'm wrong, if I'm totally off base. I don't know. I'm just telling you what I think it might be tough for men to communicate to women.
I don't know.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know. See, what I hear a lot from guys is that they're not necessarily believed or heard.
When they say what though?
Whether it's expressing themselves or through a conversation, whatever.
Is it because they haven't said it in a way that a woman can appreciate, perhaps? Maybe they're saying it and she's not hearing it because it's not like XYZ.
What the conversation usually is I say X and she hears Y. And when I look at her and I say, but I didn't say Y, the response usually is, well, that's what you meant. That's what I thought you meant. And then it goes down this rabbit hole of, but I didn't, why would I say what I didn't mean? If I said X, maybe I just mean X. And so a lot, I would say a good deal of men, when they end up in that situation, it's almost like I'm fighting to be heard. So you know what? I'm not going to say a whole lot.
Okay, so there's this idea that I think I'm getting from you, which is the level of in-depth, rich communication from a man about the most deep-seated things that are already hard to say are probably not going to happen, because if she misconstrued and changed everything else I said, why would I give her the deepest, most meaningful thing about me that only I know for her to go and say that ain't true either? Right?
Yeah, that's a pretty good way of putting it, because I've had a lot of conversations with women who are married and they were saying, in the beginning he was this way, but he doesn't talk anymore. Yeah. He doesn't do this anymore. And so I look at him and say, well, the reason why men stop talking in general, the reason why men stop talking about the things that are important to them or valuable to them or whatever, that sharing their innermost thoughts and dreams and all that, is because either they're feeling that they're not being heard or listened to. Because that's something that's huge for us men, is we want to know that our partner is actually listening to us, and it's not just about the filter. Right. We don't want to fight with that filter.
Right. And all humans do that. I think, well, what would you guess the thing is that perhaps women don't communicate to men as well as perhaps they should?
Yeah, you're putting me on the hot seat now, eh?
Well, we don't have all the answers. We're just teaching you to communicate.
This is true. I declare that I know nothing.
Okay, Jon Snow.
I think that for most guys, I think that they don't have they feel like women's intentions are not always clear.
Say more about that.
Meaning that they might say one thing, but they mean something else.
Under what circumstance?
And there's a certain level of expectation that we have to figure it out, and it means more if we figure it out than if they tell us.
Yes. You know why? Okay, so two things. Oh, that's really good.
Because this is confusing for us, because we're like, just tell us what you want. And
okay, so there's a couple things. If you say what you want, you're a pushy woman. You're not pussy ass bitch. You're a pushy ass bitch, which is very different, right?
Okay.
And women in general, if I'm talking about the things that I talk to about my friends, there's this idea of demasculating or emasculating a man that you're really into. You don't want to do that. And if the notion is that a man wants to feel like they are in charge, or any indication that you are chosen and cherished, I think those are two things that women almost anywhere would say, I want to be chosen and cherished, right? Yeah. Then an indication is that this person seeks you out, because who does the asking for long-term relationships? At the end of the day, when you look at relationships, a lot of men joke that there's this comedian, I forget who said, the only person who knows for sure if sex is happening at the end of this date is a woman, unless of course the guy's a rapist. But outside of that, the only person who knows if sex is going to happen is the woman. And at the end of the day, the other thing is for sure, which is the only person who knows if this relationship's ending in commitment or marriage is the guy. Really? Because the guy asks, right? So we've all been ingrained, if we're going back to all of our biases and socialization, to believe that women decide about whether they're having sex, because the assumption is that men want to do it way more than women, and men decide if there's going to be commitment, because the assumption is that women want commitment way more than men. So if that's the case, being sought after is an indication, I would assume, that this guy's really into me. It's not just in my head. It's not just me. He's seeking me. He's looking for information. He's really trying to understand me. He's trying to understand how I tick. He sort of knows what I'm thinking before I think it. And I'm not saying it's the right way to be, but I get it, which is if you have to keep saying, hey, I like this, hey, I like that, then you almost feel like you're just instructing a person who's not trying to understand the fabric of your being, as opposed to saying anyone could play this role because I simply puppeteer the person into being my bestie or being my companion, right? And so I think that's perhaps why, which is a show of effort, that you are chosen and cherished, as opposed to just, I gave instructions to this young man to please do this, that, and the other, and wow, he's my husband now. Doesn't sound as fun. It's sort of like the opinion of sex in the reverse, right? Which is if I have to instruct every damn step of the way, as opposed to she took some initiation and she did this and she did that. It's like, ooh, okay, we're in this together. What do you think?
I think there's a balance in there. I think that, and maybe it's the Libra in me, but I think there's a balance in there that has to be there. Because if a woman is expecting the guy is not giving any instructions, then that can be a bit of a challenge. Or if one conversation with women, I may get some hate for this, but I refuse to engage in.
Okay.
And that is, if you're hungry, and I will suggest, one or two places, and it's not what you want, then from there on in, you better make up your mind as to what you want. I'm not playing this game anymore. I will go and pick what I want, and you need to figure it out. Because if you don't know what you want, I'm sorry, I can't help you.
I have the analogous one, which is
no, we got like 3 minutes, okay?
I'm gonna be shorter than that. Men, okay. If you're horny, yeah. And I suggest 2 or 3 places, and you're not going for them, or they're not your thing, I'm going to need you to be specific.
There you go.
Because it's the same idea.
Yes.
It's just sort of the song and dance. Like, I think a lot of women want a man to be sure about sex. I think they want him to be confident about sex. Just like you're saying, did you say those many weeks ago about what is the sexiest thing? It's confidence, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the same in all directions. I think people love confident people. I think that people love confident people who their confidence isn't built on smashing other people. It's just sort of an inherent thing about them, right? And so I think what you're suggesting is you like a woman who knows what she wants, right?
Yeah.
And women like men who know what they want. The question is, do those two people want the same things? And are they mindful enough to have a conversation, knowing that this conversation might lead to the demise of this relationship, but at the end of the day, I will have learned more about myself, and perhaps I will find somebody else for whom I find those things more naturally.
I couldn't agree with you anymore. That, and that's where the struggle comes in, because of I really like this person, I might lose this person. But in the end, you have to kind of walk into it knowing that you may lose that person, quote unquote, that you never really had in the first place, but you may lose that person, but I'm going to be able to create whatever it is that I do want, because I will find somebody who's on the same pages.
Yeah.
And that fear of being alone, dare I say, that lots of people have, keeps them in, sexless marriages and abusive relationships, or
loveless marriages.
Loveless marriage. So many different things. We got like a minute left.
How do you want to close out, Patrick?
We could be talking about this like forever, and we kind of tend to. But I definitely want to say thanks for coming, hanging out again. It's always a pleasure. You've been able to toss in some of your, doctorate point of view into things. For those of you online who've been listening to us for like the last hour, I definitely want to thank you guys for coming and hanging out and being a part of this journey with us. I just want to say, if you're in a situation, and the number one thing and takeaway really is to know yourself, figure yourself out, and figure out what you like, figure out what you don't like, and then
find perfect ending
works with that.
Because that goes back to where this all came from in Greece. To thine own self be true.
There you
Plato,
go.
540 BC, same thing. We're struggling.
Hello there, this is Benjamin Clementine and listen to ILiveRadio.com.
Hey, what's up, Toronto? My name is Bosco, and you're listening to I